And today, I'm talking or reiterating the solution to our problem of living under the largest government in history from the founders and old revolutionaries, what they told us we need to do to keep that government within its proper limits. But more importantly, the fear that enables it to keep growing and growing and growing and growing. And let's kick it off. Here, I want to first point out this great quote from Thomas Jefferson. He put it this way: I consider the trial by jury as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man by which a government can be held to the principles of its constitution. Ultimately, there is no nullification. There is no state nullification. There is no jury nullification. And in many situations, there's no judicial nullification either, unless what's implied here happens first. That is, non-compliance has to be the first step. You don't get to a trial unless you first refuse to comply. You don't get to nullify something unless, well, you're shutting it down by refusing to comply. And here, of course, we know that the right of resistance, the founders, of course, thought of it as a natural right, not something that's imagined by man. The trial by jury is what Jefferson's talking about. But in order to get there, you have to have the resistance first. And here's how Theophilus Parsons put it in the Massachusetts Ratifying Convention: an act of usurpation is not obligatory. It is not law. And any man may be justified in his resistance. Usurpation, of course, is theft of power by government from the sovereign people of the several states. In our system, that is, when government does stuff that it's not authorized to do by the Constitution. And of course, it's not up to the government to tell the people what the government is authorized to do or not to do. It's ultimately the people themselves hold sovereignty or final authority. So when they usurp power, they're stealing from the people, stealing power that is not rightly theirs, and exercising that power. It is an act of usurpation, and no one is obliged to obey them, or as Parsons put it, anyone is justified in his resistance. Now, it's also this resistance, it's also part of our duty of self-preservation. Now, some of the founders, some of the old revolutionaries really leaned hard on duty to protect our rights. Samuel Adams is one of them. Here from the Rights of the Colonists in November of 1772. He put it this way: among the natural rights of the colonists are these. First, a right to life. Secondly, to liberty. Thirdly, to property, together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. But he took it further. He said these are evident branches of, rather than deductions from, the duty of self-preservation, commonly called the first law of nature. So it's a duty of your own self-preservation to be able to protect your life, liberty, and property in the best manner that the people can, that you can. Now, Patrick Henry put this type of foundational principle into practice or into words very early on in the American Revolution. If we understand the Revolution being a revolution in thought, a radical change in the views of the people, which happened over a period of 15 years before the first shots were fired, going through a gun control program in 1775. Now, he put these principles into resolutions against the hated Stamp Act in 1765. And here's how Patrick Henry put it: the inhabitants of this colony are not bound to yield obedience to any law or ordinance whatever designed to impose any taxation whatsoever upon them, other than the laws or ordinances of the General Assembly aforesaid. Short version: Patrick Henry is almost like the original 10th Amendment guy. Here he is, even before a written constitution, taking the position, like many others in the revolutionary period, taking the position that the British Parliament only had certain limited powers. And when it came to internal taxation affecting the lives of the people of Virginia, and therefore you can replicate that to every colony, they couldn't cross that line. And as soon as they did that, it's void, it's going beyond their just limits, and the people are not bound to obey them. James Madison, talking many years later about Jefferson's nullification resolutions, we can call them, in 1798, which I'll get to in a moment as well, put it this way: the right of nullification meant by Mr. Jefferson is the natural right. Again, the resistance, the nullification is the natural right to defend oneself against usurpation, theft of power, violations of life, liberty, and property. The right of nullification meant by Mr. Jefferson is the natural right, which all admit to be a remedy against insupportable oppression. Now, many people, Mike Meharry wrote a great handbook on this that we have available at shop.10thamendmentcenter.com. I wish I had the link handy here, but it's called Smashing Myths, Understanding Madison's Notes on Nullification. A lot of people who hate nullification, left, right, and center, like to point to some documents, some things that James Madison wrote later in life. But at the same time, they ignore this important statement. Madison had an important qualifier. He did not like the form of nullification being proposed at the time in the 1830s, and instead he recognized that what Jefferson was talking about was much different. It was a process that he was opposed to, and he pointed out that nullification is a natural right, and no one ever at the founding would disagree, according to James Madison, that it was not a remedy, would disagree that it was a remedy against insupportable oppression. Even Alexander Hamilton, let's get him into the mix here. I know I've been citing him a lot lately, and of course, I'm not a fan of Alexander Hamilton, but let's point this one out, because if even he's better than everyone in office today on this particular take, then man, we are in a lot of trouble. Here he is talking about the supremacy clause in Federalist number 33. He said, acts of the large society which are not pursuant to its constitutional powers will be merely acts of usurpation and will deserve to be treated as such. So if they are stealing power that they're not authorized to have, they're calling something a law, but it's not really law. How do you treat something that's law, that's not really law? Do you sit around and wait for the people who implemented it to suddenly come to their senses and stop doing what they shouldn't have been doing in the first place? No, it deserves to be treated as what it is, which is garbage, which is void, which is nothing. It should be nothing more than hot air. Now, some of the founders thought it wasn't just a good idea. So Hamilton here is saying it deserves to be treated as such. Now, of course, Hamilton thought that the government could do all kinds of stuff that it wasn't authorized to do in the first place. So his limit on what was considered usurpation is much broader or much narrower than what it should be. But he thought it was a good idea. Now, some of the founders thought that defending one's liberty, that resistance, disobedience, noncompliance, state nullification, local jury nullification was a duty. Samuel Adams focused on duty, and I know I just cited him as well in The Rights of the Colonists in 1772. I don't have the year of this one handy. I should know it off the top of my head, but I don't. We'll include it in the show notes. Alan Mosley will put that together for us for a couple hours later today. But here's how Samuel Adams put it. He said, "The liberties of our country, the freedom of our civil constitution, are worth defending at all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks." It's a duty to take a stand against government that is doing stuff that it shouldn't be doing in the first place. And here's James Madison in the Virginia Resolutions of 1798 against the Hated Alien and Sedition Acts, which is that previous quote of his, the nullification meant by Mr. Jefferson is a natural right. Those were he was regarding or referencing the Kentucky resolutions of that same year drafted by Jefferson. But here's Madison talking about duty as well on the state level. And of course, Madison described this in his report of 1800. You can talk about states in many different ways. I think there were 5 that he talked about, but it could be the state government, but it could also be the people of the several states. And this is how he clarified it's up to the people and the government being a tool of the people of each state to do something about federal acts outside of the Constitution. He said the states have the right. So again, it's the right to do something, but also goes further. It's a duty. The states have the right and are in duty bound to interpose for arresting the progress of the evil and for maintaining within their respective limits the authorities, rights, and liberties appertaining to them. So it's a duty of the people. Again, here's John Dickinson, the penman of the American Revolution, who, of course, wrote the most widely read documents on American liberty, Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania, up until publication of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. If you listen to Brian McClanahan's podcast for today, which I thought was absolutely awesome, talking about views of Federalists and the Federalist Papers, he talked quite favorably about John Dickinson, which I thought was pretty cool as well. Brian does great history, of course. You want to check that out. Just a side recommendation. But here he is arguing for ratification of the Constitution, and he's asking a rhetorical question. You know, a good constitution, he said, promotes but doesn't always produce a good administration. So some people are going to argue against ratification because, well, there's some technical issues with it. Some people just can't stand it. Some people want some changes. And he's pointing out, no matter how good we make this, you cannot guarantee that people with power will follow the rules given to them, because we should all know, and this is my take, my paraphrase on this, we should all know that people with power will always try to find ways to expand their power. Dickinson, in those letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania back in 1767, so 20 years before he wrote this coming quote that I'm going to mention here in just a moment, he said, all artful rulers who strive, this is my paraphrase, all artful rulers who strive to extend their power beyond its just limits strive to give it as much semblance of legality as possible. So he did recognize, and so many others did, that people with power would always take words on paper and try to expand their power based on those. So you could have two people arguing the exact opposite thing about the exact same phrase in an exact same document. So a good administration promotes, Dickinson told us, but does not always produce a good administration. So he said, well, of course, we're going to have some bad administrations. So then what is to be done? He said the answer is to be found before the supreme sovereignty of the people, the final authority of the people. The answer to a bad administration of government isn't just to put a new administration of government. The answer to a bad administration of government isn't to go to part of the government and to ask the government to stop doing what the government shouldn't have been doing in the first place. The answer to that question is, it's up to the supreme sovereignty of the people. Dickinson told us it is their duty to watch and their right to take care that the Constitution be preserved, or in the Roman phrase on perilous occasions, to provide that the Republic receive no damage. So it's a right and a duty of the people. And if the people fail their own duty, they shouldn't be surprised when their liberty is absolutely trashed. And it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. I mentioned just a minute or so ago that we're going to include links to these in the show notes. Alan Mosley has taken over the blogging for that. And so that'll be a few hours, a little bit after the live stream is done here this morning. But you can find this over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. And after every episode, we have an individual blog post published where you can find not only the different platforms we're on. Of course, we live stream on the big ones, YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, X, Twitch, LinkedIn. We also live stream at rumble.com, odyssey.com, and we have the audio-only podcast edition everywhere we can possibly put it at this point. If you've got a place or a platform you want to see us on, we're not there, please let us know, and we'll do our best to expand to that in the near future. I know there's a bunch of new platforms popping up, so we want to get as many places as possible. So that's 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. And before I get back to it, I want to take a quick moment and say hello to everyone out in the live chat. There's Joseph Bonamolo, Raphael, Dixie, Haji, Salt Lakers, Cowboy Roy Rogers, Tim Martin, Dixie, you get twice. Good to see you. And Cheriton Farmer. I appreciate you guys all being here. I know I'm just kind of scrolling or skimming through here as quickly as possible, but I appreciate you guys being here. Whether this is your first episode, you've been here for every single one since day one, whether you're live, whether you're in the archive, it doesn't matter. I think it's awesome that you think this is interesting enough to listen to. I know most people, when they talk about the Constitution or politics in any way, or solutions, whatever it may be, government, they're generally talking from a partisan approach. And we generally avoid that because we're living under the largest government in history. None of these people are good. It's not possible for them, anyone in power, to be one of the good guys. And the solution to our problem does not revolve around getting the right people in office. As Patrick Henry warned us, anyone who puts the fate of their liberty in the chance that the rulers are good men, they're always going to lose their liberty. So if you're just relying on people to get in power and use that power in the right way or just hand it back, you're going to be very, very disappointed in the long run. Anyway, short version, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad you find this interesting. So let's get back to this. Now, we've established that defiance, resistance, nullification, they're three sides of the same coin, really. They're part of our natural right. They're part of our natural rights. It's also a duty, according to many of the founders and the old revolutionaries. But it is not just a good idea. It's not just a duty. It's not just a right. It really is the way to keep the feds within the bounds of the Constitution. It's not just something that you try later on, after everything else has failed. In many situations, after everything else has failed, if you wait for decades and decades and decades, you create an environment where it becomes so much more difficult. And that's where we are today. So it is extremely difficult to turn this ship around from the largest government, largest empire in history to an actual land of the free. But it really is our right and our duty to start making steps in that direction. Here in Federalist number 46, James Madison told us that keeping the feds in check within the bounds of the Constitution, to stop them when they overreach their authority, which is constantly today, it requires defiance, disobedience by the people, and, in his words, a refusal to cooperate with officers of the Union. This is not some hippy-dippy here from the left coast talking about civil disobedience. This is James freaking Madison telling us you have to use a refusal to cooperate with officers of the Union. When I have a problem with my Apple product, I tend to go to the company that made it to help me resolve it. Now, James Madison, they call him the father of the Constitution. I think that's an overstatement, but he certainly was very influential in pushing that through and, of course, in the creation of it. So if we want to understand how to enforce the Constitution, shouldn't we look to people like James Madison, John Dickinson, and many others who told us that it's up to the people, a refusal to cooperate is essential. Here's Thomas Jefferson in his draft for the Kentucky Resolutions of 1798, where powers are assumed which have not been delegated, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. So whenever the federal government assumes powers it's not supposed to be exercising, again, for us today, that's 24/7, 365. It's constantly, so pick and choose. Anytime they exercise powers not delegated to them, the rightful remedy is nullification. It's not just a mere good idea. It's not something to try later. It's something that should be done immediately for everything. That's Thomas Jefferson. And here's James Iredell, who was one of the first associate justices of the Supreme Court. He was nominated for that role by George Washington. In the North Carolina ratifying convention, he put it this way: the only resource against usurpation is the inherent right of the people to prevent its exercise. So James Iredell, another Federalist supporter of the Constitution, a Supreme Court justice, tells us the only way to deal with usurpation, a theft of power by the general government, the federal government, or today the largest empire in history. The only way to deal with that usurpation is the inherent right of the people to prevent its exercise, not to beg the government to stop doing what the government shouldn't have been doing in the first place. But, no matter how many times, and this is a quick take on this part of it, every time we point out that nullification, there's three sides of the same coin: resistance, defiance, disobedience, whatever you want to call it. Every time we point out that nullification requires noncompliance by the people, that it's the rightful remedy, we get plenty of opposition from people who claim to support the Constitution, to support liberty, to support both. They basically tell us things like, oh, it doesn't work. It never has worked. That's, first of all, because, well, they're ignorant of history. And some people are willfully ignorant, and I would say most people in that situation are, because they're happy to accept what they've been spoon-fed either by government-run schools, or they think that government-run schools are only bad now, and then the education I got when I was a kid was so much better, but it was garbage all along. It was garbage even when it was good compared to today. That's because the government doesn't teach us how to stop the government. They're never going to. That's just not what they're going to do. That would be stupid on their part, but, smart for us. So it's ignorance. It's willful ignorance because they haven't gone out and tried to research more. Or maybe they're willfully ignorant because they believe what some political partisan told them about the Constitution. They believe what I have to say rather than finding the words for yourselves. That's why we include the source documents in our show notes for these episodes. So you can be like, Bolden, you said this. And if it's my opinion, it's my opinion. But if I'm basing my opinion on a founder, an old revolutionary, you're going to be able to read what they had to say in context and be like, Bolden, you're stupid, or you're right, or the founders were wrong or right, whatever. So you can make up your own mind. So there is a lot of ignorance of this. But they also tell us that it will never work because, well, things like the government has so much power, there's nothing you can do about it. One dude yesterday on X basically said that government, when you try to defy their mandates, rules, laws, regulations, orders, whatever, when people use non-compliance, government will eventually catch everyone who defies them. Now, this is ultimately people living in fear. And here, when John Adams was one of the good guys writing in Thoughts on Government in April of 1776, he pointed out that fear is the foundation of most governments. And he went on to talk about how, well, the American people aren't going to live like this. And maybe in 1776, they weren't. But today, there's rampant fear. And fear is the foundation of government power. I would just remove the word most in this situation, at least in modern times. Maybe some throughout history, people have not succumbed to fear, but I think all through history, this is kind of the standard. Fear is the foundation of government power. Now, you can have fear in many situations on this. Now, a lot of people today, I think, are fearful of freedom. They're afraid of liberty. They tell us if people are free to make their own choices, people are going to be dying in the streets. Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. It's going to be absolute insanity. And a lot of people live in fear of freedom, fear of themselves, fear of their neighbors, fear of just free choice. But many other people who are actually on our side, who actually want to see liberty succeed, tell us they're afraid of the government. And well, to be honest with you, government is a dangerous monster. There's much to be afraid of. They are out to get all of us at all times. They're spying on all of us constantly. They're telling us what we can own, what we can buy, how we can defend ourselves. And in many situations, when we have to pay for, well, man, the list goes on and on. Fear is the foundation of government power. And when people tell us you can't, or you'll never get away, you'll never be able to nullify, or we don't want you to nullify, for example, Ian Millhiser at the rightfully defunct Think Progress some years ago was concerned that many people in the more mainstream left were getting on board with our effort to nullify the NSA by turning off resources. And you know what his argument against it was? It wasn't that, oh, this is terrible. Of course, he made some kind of a stretch of some constitutional arguments, but he really focused on, even if you disagree with me on these constitutional arguments, don't do it. Because if they get away with this at the 10th Amendment Center, they're going to implement all kinds of other nullification that's going to destroy all of our social programs that we love so dearly. So it was fear of losing their control over other people. So it's fear on all sides of this. And that fear keeps fueling more and more power. Thomas Paine put it this way: the strength and powers of despotism consist wholly in the fear of resisting it. So the author of Common Sense tells us, this is a guy who also wrote These Are the Times That Try Men's Souls in December of 1776 as well. Recognize that the only way you get tyrants is when the people are afraid to resist them, to oppose them, to stand up to them. So what does this fear lead to? Fear leads to compliance. And compliance is how you guarantee tyranny. John Dickinson again, here he is in his great broadside against the Stamp Act in late 1765. He urged people to refuse to comply with it. Don't use it. He said, why? If you comply with the act by using fixed papers or stamped papers, if you comply with the act, you rivet perpetual chains upon your unhappy country. Compliance is violence, ultimately. Compliance empowers the government to do what you don't want them to do, and it sets the detestable precedent, is what John Dickinson said, for more. He said, when you comply with this, you've established the detestable precedent for what they want to do, and this is only the starting point. Here's Lysander Spooner. I always have to cite Spooner on this type of a message from A Defense for Fugitive Slaves. He points out that compliance is also what gives the government unlimited power. Ultimately, when you get down to it philosophically, if people comply with stuff that the government isn't supposed to be implementing in the first place, that is basically giving them a blank check. And here's how he put it: To say that an unconstitutional law must be obeyed until it is repealed is saying that an unconstitutional law is just as obligatory as a constitutional one, for the latter is binding only until it's repealed. Spooner continued. He said, there would therefore be no difference at all between a constitutional and an unconstitutional law in respect to their binding force, and that would be equivalent to abolishing the Constitution and giving the government unlimited power. So to Lysander Spooner, compliance with an unconstitutional act, waiting for the government to stop doing what the government shouldn't have been doing in the first place, is giving the government unlimited power. James Otis Jr. put it this way, 1767, so long as people, this one may have been 62, so long as people will submit to arbitrary measures, so long will they find masters. So as long as people continue to submit, there will be people out there who are saying, well, they went along with this one, they went along with this lockdown, this mandate, this regulation, this prohibition, this restriction on their activity, this surveillance, this restriction on free speech. As long as people continue to submit to that, people who want to exercise power are going to have like stars, light bulbs going off. Oh, well, if they could get away with this, I could probably push them a little further and a little further and a little further. And Dickinson talked about that quite extensively in his letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania. He pointed out that a free people lose their freedom the moment they allow government to go one step too far. The moment, not when they end up exercising all kinds of power based on that precedent years later. You lose your freedom. So, in essence, we're not free today. We don't live in the land of the free. It's not even close. Here's James Otis again. There is nothing that will destroy liberty more than a prevailing opinion that it is better tamely to submit than nobly assert and vindicate our privileges. Nothing destroys liberty more than sitting idly by, whether it's based on fear, and I think in most situations today, it is based on fear. Fear of freedom on the one hand, I think that's the majority. But then on the good guy side, it's fear of repercussion. And ultimately, we're not going to get from despotism to liberty, as Jefferson put it, in a featherbed. And I want to close out with this great poem by Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman's caution to the state and any one of them or any city of the states. Well, let's start over. To the states, or any one of them, or any city of the states, resist much, obey little. Once unquestioning obedience, once fully enslaved. Once fully enslaved, no nation, race, city of this earth ever afterward resumes its liberty. I'm not sure if that's exact. Nation, state, city. I'm not sure the exact words. I'm trying to read his handwriting. I will link to it in the show notes so you can look it up. Basically, once the people stop resisting, once the people completely comply, then you become fully enslaved. And if you want to help us get this kind of message out to more and more people, we work hard every single day. We're punching way above our weight class here at the TAC. It's not even close. If you want to help us get this kind of message out to more and more people, absolutely nothing helps us do this work more than the financial faith and support of our members. You can join us for as little as $2 a month over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/member. So if you got a couple of bucks of that dirty government fiat, throw it our way. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime options for you to pick out. Don't feel any obligation to join us. We've got over 10,000 articles, podcasts, we've got a bunch of handbooks and books, and we've got our new State of the Nullification Movement report coming out in the next couple of months. Mike Meharry's working on another great handbook, Rhetoric and Resistance in the Face of Tyranny, looking at the ramp-up of resistance throughout the American Revolution before 1775. Lots of awesome stuff. We're going to keep doing this and making it available as widely as possible for free to as many people as possible. But in order to do this work, it costs money. And that's why I'm always out here begging. Please join us if you're able to. So if you're able to, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. I'm very grateful for any consideration you can give to joining us today. Let me take a look over in the live chat, see if there's any quick comments that catch my eye. Haji says, make America states again. That's always a fun one. Free people don't comply with tyranny. As Jefferson put it, a free people claim their rights as derived from the laws of nature and not as a gift of their chief magistrate. It's not liberty if it comes with a government permission slip or government approval. It's only really freedom if you can do it, whether the government likes it or not. Hi to Sharon Patriot, who says thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Raphael talks about liberty lost in the 19th century. We would point out much further back. Freedom is lost as soon as you allow government to violate the Constitution, and that would go all the way back to 1791, if not earlier. We've done that a couple of episodes on that as well. I'll take a look over in the live chat a little bit later today. Please continue leaving comments, especially in the archive. And I also review a lot of the comments over at rumble.com and odyssey.com, plus YouTube and elsewhere, Twitter, X, etc. Within the next couple of hours while we're putting together the blog post and I'm doing some other things as well. That's where you're going to catch my attention the most, but it also helps trigger the algorithms, especially the mainstream platforms. So do reviews on Apple Podcasts, any other podcast platform, smashing the like, subscribing, notifications, all that stuff helps us spread the word. Don't forget that membership program. Don't forget to, well, I don't know. I really just appreciate you guys being here. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed sharing this information with you. And I hope to see you next time here on the path to liberty.